Mhm. Good evening, beautiful women of the Vision Builders community. I'm just doing a quick check to make sure that we are streaming into our Facebook group, and we are. Good evening, good evening. Well, good evening on my side of the planet, and good morning on Anita's side of the planet. Good morning,
Good
Anita.
morning. Yeah.
So before we dive into this interview, I just want to remind everybody to take a minute to turn off all your distractions. Take a deep breath and just be in this space. It's always a really treasured experience to tune into somebody else's story, to hear the adventures, the highs and the lows, and the lessons that come through all of it. Because as we do this, we learn so much about our own lives. And it was interesting. I sent Anita a message earlier as I was going through her story, and it's just like, wow, the parallels are amazing. So I am so excited to dive into this interview. So Anita McKenna is coming to us all the way from the UK as a life coach and integrative counselor. Welcome, Anita, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me in. Yeah,
Yeah,
really excited to be
pleasure.
here.
I love that accent. It's so good. So Anita, what I want to do is just take us back to early days. I was really interested to read about that sort of what I call not good enough syndrome that stuck with you till you were sort of in your 30s.
Yeah.
So I'd love to go back and think about, who you were as you launched yourself into womanhood, who you were when you know sort of that last year at school, and then starting adulting.
Mm.
Can you remember, where you were and what sort of started to shape that belief system of not being good enough?
Yeah, I think one of the big things I noticed is I am one of four daughters, and I'm number three out of four.
Yeah.
So my space in the family, I wasn't special. So there was the eldest, and then there was the youngest, and then
Mhm.
there was two in between one. So I wasn't even the middle child. I was one of two
Yeah.
middle children. And I know from a very, very young age, I tried to create something special about me. So I actually tried to be the boy in the family,
Yep.
because we didn't have any boys. So that was kind of how I presented.
Yep.
And back in the 70s, the male role was he was the, he went out and earned the money, and very emotionless. And I know that that was exactly how I presented myself, that I didn't do emotions. I didn't share my fears with anybody. I don't think I understood it myself,
Yep.
what was going on for myself back then. So, kind of going into work, my three sisters all followed a very traditional route of they went into retail and they all got married and had children. I chose to do something quite different. I began with an admin role, but then I decided to, I chose to have a career.
Yep.
So I was very focused on creating a career. Kind of going up the ladder, progressing through the kind of management space, and very, very money orientated or materialistic.
Yep.
I felt that if I got those things, they would make me feel better. And I think that that's a story so common,
Yeah.
that we constantly look for that thing that'll make us happy.
Yeah.
Um, and we get it and we're happy for a moment, but it's very external,
Yep.
and then we want the next thing that's going to make us happy.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of that time just very discontented, very, unhappy with what I had, and always wanting more, because I believed that the more would bring um happiness, basically. Yeah.
Mhm. Do you feel like was there much of an age gap with your sisters? Was it?
There's literally 3 years in between each of us. So that every 3 years for whatever it was, 9 years, my parents had a baby.
Yeah.
We're relatively close in age, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And on your journey, your connection with your parents, your mother, do you feel like it was always recognition of the goal, or was there recognition of the journey and the study and the work that went into the goal? I'm just
I
curious.
think and this is my reflection
Yeah, of
on what I
course.
recall. This isn't
Of
necessarily what
course.
was put out there, and I'm really
Yeah,
careful to say that because
of
my
course.
parents are amazing.
Yeah.
Um, but my feeling was I was one of four kids,
Yeah.
and individually there wasn't much recognition.
Yeah.
And because I was more demanding, I had different needs, definitely had different needs to my three sisters.
Yep.
Um, my needs were often not met because I had three sisters who were all doing
Mm,
this thing. I
mm,
wanted to do that thing.
mm.
So it felt very much like it didn't matter what did.
Yeah.
It wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
I've definitely had a critical parent on my shoulder
Yeah.
for a lot of my life, you know.
Yeah.
So I don't feel that there was an awful lot of recognition. It was survival, I think, almost for my mom. You know, she had four kids to take
Yeah.
care of, and yeah, it was just kind of making sure all of us stayed alive, really. You know, fed, watered, and alive.
Yeah. Used to make it, I'm a mum of four, and I used to make a joke about, it's just not parenthood, it's called guilthood. There's always something. And I think it's like every generation, every parent,
Yeah.
as they reflect on, how they could have done things better or things they wish they'd
Mm.
done. But we're all learning. There's no rule book.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and there's a million rule books, isn't there?
Of
But
course.
they all have different versions. They all have their own version of what's the right way to do it, and
Yeah.
none of it's right. It's,
Yeah.
it's yeah, dealing with what
Absolutely.
you've got in front of you at the time. Yeah,
Yeah, but I think the power comes in being curious in our experience, because when we think about our experience and talk about our experiences as women, then we can take that back to how we talk to our kids and their
absolutely. Yes.
experiences. Like I'm thinking of my third child, and she's the loudest, she's the drama queen, and part of that, I mean, she's a little mini me, but part of that is, like it's just like she lost her role as the baby when number four came along.
Yeah,
So we're all doing things to be seen and heard, and
yeah,
it's just how that plays out. So I just think it's really interesting from a curiosity point. So
yeah,
you had amazing success. You got all the things, the house, the car, the partner, the
yeah.
baby came.
A gorgeous baby girl. Yes.
Ah, oh, and And then there was, well, I mean, first of all, you got all those things, and still there was this kind of niggling sense of still not.
Yeah, and I think it's really difficult because there was only a 7 week period from me having my daughter to my partner leaving.
Yeah.
And obviously I was a brand new mum, and I didn't know what way was up, really in that period of time. So I I I definitely didn't feel I had it all.
Yeah.
Um, but because of what was happening in life at that point, it very quickly kind of fell apart, you know. So I didn't really I didn't have the time to settle into going, this is everything. I definitely didn't have everything,
Yeah.
but I definitely didn't have the time to kind of settle into it and feel contented.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you talk about this sort of catastrophic event where everything just kind of turned upside down.
Yeah.
It sounds like the catalyst for that was your daughter's dad leaving.
Mm.
Tell us about that period and
Yeah, so I had my daughter in the June, and then in the August, and this was 2008. And if we all remember, 2008 was that the first financial crisis that we went through back then. Um, so he left when my baby was only 7 weeks old, and unfortunately had gone to somebody else. So there was kind of a whole mess with that in itself. I went back to work when my daughter was 5 months old
Mm.
and got made redundant 3 weeks later,
Mm.
um, which was just before Christmas. And
Mm.
then I had an awful lot of debt. I owned two properties. Again, because of what was going on with the financial side of things, one mortgage was ridiculous. Um, and the other one thankfully was dropping, and I had tenants in the other one. But because I didn't have an income, I was having to basically surrender all of that, because otherwise
Yeah.
benefits and things. Um, and I got to the point where I just couldn't cope anymore. I couldn't find another job because obviously I was a single parent with a tiny baby.
Yeah.
I was struggling to meet any payments. I had
Mm.
a lot of debt collectors come in, and yeah,
Mm.
it was just that awful time.
Mm.
So I took the decision to surrender the properties and declare myself bankrupt,
Mm.
which was so difficult, having spent all of those years um, getting to that place, feeling financially secure, feeling
Yeah.
I had everything,
Yeah.
to almost actually voluntarily give it all over, give it
Mm.
back.
Mm.
Um, and the other part of that was then I had to move back to my hometown where I still live now. Because at that point I was living in the city centre, I was living in Liverpool,
Yeah.
so I was lovely life. Came back to my hometown and then was living in a rented flat, single parent on benefits, living in a rented flat back in my hometown.
Yeah.
And it was like the epitome of everything I dreaded in my life.
Yeah.
Um, and I became that. And that was a really hard thing for me to
Mm.
understand for myself, was because I had labels
Yeah.
back there. I was successful. I had a lovely job. I had a lovely car. I was manager, and so I had some labels that I felt proud of back
Mm.
then.
Yeah.
And suddenly I felt like I was nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a mom, and my daughter, needed me, and she idolized me,
Yeah.
but it didn't feel enough. It didn't, so much of that had been taken away
Yeah.
that it felt like there was not an awful lot left, which
Mm.
obviously then felt into the whole not enough,
Mm.
because I was just a mum.
Mm.
And that had never been part of my plan, that I'd said for many years I would literally go to work to pay the childminder, if that was the only thing I could do. If I was quite confident that that's what I would have done.
Yeah.
The universe had different plans, but
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah,
It is amazing. I'm thinking of a coach that I work with who went, these stories of bankruptcy, it is sadly not at all uncommon. We've had other
mm,
women in this series that have experienced that as well. But there's always amazing gifts that come from it. Not that it's not something that we would ever wish on anybody, but
no,
you can see the gifts that come from these experiences. It makes it feel not quite so
absolutely, yes,
devastating. But, she talked about it was her greatest fear as well, which is interesting because that's sort of the language that you used. But,
yeah,
I think the universe has a way of doing this to show us that we're going to be okay anyway.
yeah,
We're going to be
absolutely,
okay. We can live in so much fear of what if, and then that what if happens. And it's like, actually, I'm okay. It's not fun. I don't wish it. I don't want it. I don't want it to stay like this, but I'm okay. I'm gonna survive this. I'm gonna live through this.
mm,
And so for you to have hit that sort of level of rock bottom for yourself,
yeah,
I
yeah,
imagine that that's given you a foundation for the rest of your life, that it's like I can handle anything.
pretty much, yeah. I mean, and it was, it absolutely was a rock bottom, and I know that I struggled massively with depression. It took me a long time to kind of climb out of that.
Mm.
Um, but it's kind of just recognizing that at the worst of it,
Mm.
um, I was still okay. I was still surviving. And it was survival, it wasn't, there was definitely no thriving going on to start with, but it's recognizing that actually I did get through it, you
Yeah.
know. And I think I don't often think back that far anymore. I tend to stay more in kind of where I'm at. One of the things that I definitely learned back then was I have enough.
Hmm.
And that was an incredible feeling, an incredible acknowledgement, was I didn't need anything else.
Yeah.
I didn't need the car, the apartment, the partner even, me and my daughter were enough. and we
Yeah.
had enough. We had the food that we needed. We had, milk in the fridge and, heating. We had enough.
Yeah.
And that was an amazing discovery
Yeah.
that, I didn't need any of that stuff for me to be happy.
Yeah.
Um,
It's interesting. I'll never forget when my children were all very little. We went on a holiday to Queensland, another state in Australia, and we stayed in this tiny little. It was a two bedroom, so it was four children and my first husband, their dad, and myself. So there was six of us in this tiny little, and I think there was like two bedrooms and one bathroom and no toys. And I can still remember my youngest daughter pulling out a bottom drawer, and she and her sister, like taking turns to sit in this drawer and playing with things. I was like, we are so happy. We are so
yeah.
happy. We don't need this. Like all this stuff,
Yeah.
and in my mind, I was like, when I get home, I just want to throw everything out.
Yeah.
But it is. We just keep accumulating and getting more and more and
Absolutely.
more and more and more stuff until we're just like almost buried under all this stuff and then scared to lose it. And so an experience like you had just confirms that we really don't need very much.
No,
Yeah.
no. Mm.
Yeah. So the rebuilding was a long process, and I hear absolutely and relate to your story of losing your confidence and handing your power over to other people all the time. I
Yeah,
had a similar experience. So just,
yeah,
just reflecting on that time in your life,
yeah.
what was your experience?
I know, certainly for the first sort of 12 months, I I literally didn't know what was up. I didn't know, as in what way was up. Um, I had no, I think because I was put in such a different position,
Mm,
um, in life, I had been, confident, successful businesswoman. I knew exactly what I was doing. There was a hierarchy.
yep.
And I followed the rules, and I have always been a bit of a conformist, so I knew exactly what was happening. And suddenly I was put in this environment where there were no rules as such. I had this screaming baby who I needed to tend to.
Yeah.
Um, I I had no idea what I was supposed to do. That the rule books suddenly didn't apply at all. I remember it was in the January, and so my daughter was 6, 7 months old, and watching the news at lunchtime. And another mum had been was being reported on because she'd hurt a baby.
Mm,
I think she had two children, a 4-year-old and a 6-month-old, and she was on the news because she'd sadly killed her baby. And I remember the impact of that, the fear
mm,
that I might get to that place,
yeah.
because I knew I was struggling. I knew I wasn't coping. I was on my own. At that point, I was still in Liverpool, so I didn't even have my family immediately around me. I was very much in a
Mm,
city centre with no support, um, and just being so determined not to be on the lunchtime news. And that was literally kind of what was going through my head was, I don't want to be on the news. I don't want to be that mum who couldn't cope and didn't ask for help.
yeah.
Um, and it was that point that kind of got me to go to the GP, speak to the doctor, and get some support. And actually, I got counselling. I got given counselling at that point. Um, but it's just even recognizing,
Mhm.
that, and I had empathy for the woman who was being reported on, because I can understand how, from my perspective, how difficult it was, how
Yeah.
all consuming it all is. Um, Being a mum of a tiny baby is
Yeah.
bloody hard work,
It
and
is.
I don't think until you're in that you can ever get that.
No.
And of course, being in that and not having a partner,
Yeah.
and not having immediate family support around me. Um, I remember I used to come home at like 3 in the afternoon. I'd go into town for the day. I'd get home at 3 in the afternoon, and the door had closed, and I felt like it was a prison cell closing.
Yeah.
Um, Gosh, that makes me feel very emotional. God.
Um,
Um,
yeah.
because I knew I'd seen nobody then until the following day. And I didn't socialize an awful lot or anything. But it did feel like the cell door slamming. It was a horrible feeling. And I know I found it really hard to accept that I wasn't coping because I had been so fiercely independent up to that point. Um, I didn't need anything. I didn't ask my parents for any support with anything. My sisters all relied on them because they all had kids.
Yeah.
Um, and I was very independent and, I was very proud of how independent I was. Um, so actually just acknowledging for myself that
Mhm.
I wasn't coping and I needed some support was um, a huge feat for me to kind of even just
Yeah.
acknowledge that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think there's any mums listening that don't understand that. I truly don't.
Mm.
There are moments when you just feel like you're gonna lose your absolute marbles, just lose your
Yeah.
shit. It can be so stressful, and there's so much vulnerability, and there's so much uncertainty, and there's so much that's unknown. And when you throw all of that into being on your own, it is enormous.
Absolutely.
It's enormous. Um, and asking for help. It is so hard. It is so
Yes.
hard. And there is so much conditioning around us that says asking for help shows weakness, asking for help shows that you're hopeless, you're not good enough, like it just
Yeah.
feeds all of that. I've told a story in an earlier interview about I became a single mum with 4 children under 8 and ending up in hospital with them because we got tonsillitis, and I got to the point where I was so dehydrated and I couldn't even swallow my own saliva, and the doctor wouldn't let me leave until I asked for help. And it was just this moment of like, I don't know who I want to ask for help. I just
Yeah.
felt horrible. It felt
Yeah.
horrible. But the lesson that I learned from doing that is that I asked a girlfriend, and the lesson that I learned was that when I asked other people for help, it gave them permission to ask me. And as women
Yeah.
and as mums,
Yeah.
the more that we can have these conversations and make it okay and actually show that it's an act of courage, and B, an act of generosity. Because when
Yeah.
we ask somebody else for help, it allows them to ask us, and we stop this
Yes.
ridiculous cycle of just doing it all ourselves.
Yeah.
So I am grateful to you. I know that's not an easy story to tell, and
No.
I acknowledge that and thank you for telling it. So from there, you moved closer to family support, which I
Yeah.
imagine made a massive difference, I hope.
It did. Yeah, definitely. Well, I was within walking distance of my parents
Yeah,
and my sister.
yeah.
And I would see them most days, anytime that I was struggling with my daughter,
Mm,
just bundle into the pram and walk over,
yep,
So just having that on the doorstep
yep,
made such a difference. Yeah,
yep. It's just knowing you're not alone,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
knowing you can talk to somebody. So even going to see that doctor and then the counselor, and it's just these points of contact, even if they're not particularly giving you anything or doing anything, it's just having somebody that you're connected
yeah,
with can listen to what's going on in your life. So you
yeah,
don't feel so alone. Enormously powerful.
yeah,
So then
definitely.
started the rebuild, slowly, slowly, the confidence.
Mm.
And you had another pivotal moment, which was when you were able to find to buy a home again, I think. Was that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it did seem like, and I genuinely believe that the universe course corrected me 15 years ago. I was going down a path and the universe was kind of going, no, it's not right, it's not yours. So it was a tough lesson, but I am very, very grateful for it. It was hard, and like I say, I wouldn't wish it on anybody and I wouldn't wish it on myself again, but
Yeah.
I am so grateful for
Yeah.
what it gave me,
Yeah.
the power of curiosity even, actually being able to be curious rather than focusing on what I haven't got.
Yeah.
Um, and then, so yeah, so 6, 7 years ago it probably was now. And obviously I was in a better place, a much, much, much better place. I was qualified as a counsellor, and we had a nice home,
Yeah.
lovely south-facing garden. Um, and I don't even know if that works down in Australia, to be fair. So south facing for me is we get the sun all day. Um, when you kind of go, is that a different thing in a different hemisphere?
Yes, it is. The opposite.
Sorry, the obscure thing you think about. It was a nice home. We were settled. We were happy. We were borrowing a dog from a family,
Yeah.
which was lovely. So we got to have spent time there. Um, my daughter was really settled at school. I remember the biggest compliment I got given from one of her teachers was, "She's contented."
Mm.
And it was like, it made me cry, because I was so discontented all my life, that to hear that, and content is it can feel like such a meh word, but actually it's so beautiful to
Yeah.
feel content.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
It is.
Um, and then I'm literally in my house that I bought. It was an old school, an old high school, um, was getting knocked down, and they were building houses, and I just saw that they were doing shared ownership houses, and it's like, oh, I'll look into that, because renting in itself didn't bother me, being a renter rather than an owner. But it was the financial side of things that, rent, certainly in kind of private rental, it's extortionate. And going into older life, hitting, I mean, I'm 54 now. No, I'm not 53 now. But going into retirement,
Yeah.
and the thought of paying private rental, it just wasn't good.
Yeah.
So the thought of owning my own home, um, would be really good, just on a financial level, if nothing else. And so I inquired, and there was possibilities.
Mm.
Um, it ended up being a right song and dance, because the first mortgage broker that I was speaking with kind of led me down a path, and then just went, "Yeah, sorry, we can't help you. Bye."
Yeah.
And it's like, so I'd been told I could. And
Yeah.
again, it was a real challenge for my self-belief of, they said I was good enough. They said I had the means. They said, I fit the criteria. And then they went, "Actually, no, you don't. You're not good enough. God, sorry."
Yeah.
Um, which really knocked my confidence. I,
Yeah.
I was literally sat in the airport lounge about to go on holiday with my mum and dad and my daughter, when I got the email through, and it was like,
Mm.
and I didn't want to share it with them, because I didn't want them to sort of be upset by it, or, feel down about it. Um, but it had ignited a belief in me, and I think that that's the thing that I've learned is, if I believe I can, I can. And that belief was the thing. So I went and had my holiday. And I did take some time to kind of lick my wounds a little bit while I was, in the
Yeah.
sun. Um, but I came back, and I found a different way. And I found a
Mm.
mortgage provider, and they did accept everything I was after. I was able to offer, and I got the house. And it was a real catalyst to me believing, actually, I can have an amazing life.
Mm.
And it's not about the house. The house isn't the thing.
Yeah.
It's the um, believing I can,
Yeah.
and then doing the work to achieve what I believe.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and yes, it was a real catalyst to me then. Um, I started up my own private practice in counselling, and even just the thought of, I remember saying that sort of 6 years ago, I'm going to set up my private practice. It's like, oh my God, who am I to have a private practice? Who do you think you are? But I
Yeah.
did, and I'm now, fully self-employed. Back then, I was actually still working two jobs,
Yeah.
um, but I am fully self-employed. I pay for everything,
Yeah.
um, and again, it's about having that belief.
Oh, yeah.
You can do something, then allows you to take the action
Yeah.
to kind of achieve what it is that you're looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It starts with little things. Like you just, like even if it's that you push snooze on the alarm clock every morning, you never just get yourself out of bed when you're supposed to get out of bed. And
Yeah.
then suddenly you make the decision, right, at 6 o'clock, I'm going to get up every morning. And then your confidence starts to build, doesn't it? And then it's just
Absolutely.
the next
Yeah.
thing, and then the next thing. And it's like, right, I'm going to, stop buying a chocky bar every time I go and fill
Yeah.
up with fuel, and you stop doing it. And then it's like, okay, all right. So then the confidence builds, and you start to trust your word in yourself that you're going to do what you say you're going to
Yes.
do. And
Yeah.
then that builds into buying a house or starting a
Yeah.
business or doing, it makes me laugh because I still have this conversation with girlfriends. It's like, oh, this feels very grown up, even though I'm in my 50s. It's like I make a decision. This feels like a grown up decision.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
We're still growing up. We're still growing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But I think, the thing that I'm hearing, the thread, the powerful thing that I'm hearing in this is the unfortunate thing that we have to define ourselves by what we have. So it's like I'm
Mm,
successful when I have this much money in the bank, or I'm successful when I have the house or the car or the husband, the partner, the children, the whatever it is that we've built into
yes,
our brains to define success, then I'll be a successful person.
yes.
And so to be in a place where suddenly you're back to zero, I mean, you had your daughter, but you're back to ground zero, and then building your identity again, and then getting to the place where you can tell your story with such grace and power, and to see the gifts in all of it. This is the bit that I think is so powerful for people
Mm,
to really understand that there is nothing to be ashamed of in any of our stories. It doesn't matter what it is, even the bits where we lose our shit with our kids,
yeah.
because we're human. We're all human. We're all learning. When we know better, we do better. When we've got more
Mm,
support, we do better. When we support each other, we do better. It's
definitely. Yeah.
just this constant kind of growth and sharing. So
Mm,
I think if I listen to your story, I hear so much of that. It's a fantastic
yeah.
story.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
So what does life look like for Anita now? Where are you up to? How old's your daughter? She's
She is 15. She'll be 16 in June.
mm,
So yes, very, very grown up. Um, and that's a it's a blessing and a curse at the same time of being that age. And don't get me wrong, she's a gorgeous girl. She's really, really lovely.
yeah.
But obviously I'm her mum. And it's only ever been the two of
Oh,
us here.
okay.
So yeah, I get the brunt of um
Oh
the
yeah.
mood. But when she's not in a mood, she's lovely. And yes, she's doing her GCSEs this year, which is like her first main exams.
Yeah.
She's got prom coming up. So all of that's lovely stuff. Yeah, she's doing amazing. Yeah.
Do you go to prom? Did you have a prom? Is that something that
I
you
didn't. No, we had a school disco on a Friday night. That was it. But now it's quite a big thing for the school kids now to do prom. Yeah, with the big stretch limos and all
oh
the posh gowns and everything. Yeah, so which is lovely. But
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Mm,
big deal. It's a big
yes.
deal. So in all the lessons you've learned, all the things, the tools that you've picked up along the way, obviously as a coach now and as a counselor, you've got a fairly large toolbox.
Mm.
If I was to open a magic funnel, a magic money funnel, and you had millions or billions of dollars to invest in something, what is the change that you would love to create in the world?
I think, I mean, curiosity is definitely something. I think people being curious about, understanding better rather than having a belief that
Mm,
they know better,
mm,
because we do see from our own perspective so much.
yeah.
And if we can only ever sit in this place
Mm,
and judge from this place, because I think unfortunately we do,
mm,
um, we can't ever sort of grow.
yeah,
But by having curiosity really allows us to grow.
yeah,
Um, but it's then also keeping some really lovely, healthy boundaries in that so that you're not allowing anyone or anything to impact in there. So, and this is something that I found really hard for myself is although I was outwardly a very confident person in my younger years, I had very little confidence and my boundaries were horrific. I had a
mm,
big, massive stone wall up in front of me, so people might not ever get in. But I know that I really struggled to have healthy boundaries with family. They didn't ask much of me because I had the wall up.
yeah,
Um, I crumbled anytime that there was ever a request sort of thing. But that's something that I've learned over the years is having lovely, healthy boundaries really helps us to feel in control of our own lives.
yeah.
So not feeling that we're at the beck and call of others. So um, asking for support 100%, but doing it in a way that takes care of our needs, not other people's.
Yeah.
Doing it for ourselves rather than to support others,
Yeah.
or not to support others, but to take care of other people's needs. So I guess yes, it's kind of that those two alongside each other, curiosity and boundaries to
Mm.
really support you to feel fulfilled, to feel content, to
Yeah.
feel that your life has purpose and you have control in your life. We can't control the world, we all know that, as much as we try at times, to control everything externally. But actually to feel in control of what's going on in your own life is such a powerful place to be. And so for me, recognizing that happiness is very much an inside job,
Mm.
that isn't about the things,
Yeah.
it's about, taking a moment to appreciate the sunshine, just noticing that those things, and yeah, having curiosity around what might I feel happy about today, what might turn up for me today, what might I make into a silver lining,
Mm.
so even when something awful happens, looking for the silver lining, looking for, how might I, what might I learn from this experience, because I think if you're in that space, bad stuff happens, and we can't stop that,
Mm.
but taking what we can from it, rather than feeling it's been done to us, really helps us to kind of feel, like I say, more in control of what's going on in our lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, what does a blooming, beautiful life look like to you now?
So for me, it's really having the freedom to do
Mm.
how live my life how I choose to live my life. I mean, obviously, yes, there's still constraints, as in, my daughter goes to school, so I need to be home for term time. Um, but it's being able to do something like this at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, because I haven't got to be in work in 20 minutes. It's being able to go to a Pilates class on a Friday in the middle of the day because that's how I've structured my week. It's feeling fulfilled, feeling that if I want to do something, I can make that happen.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm the one that decides those things. Now, I know self-employment isn't for everybody, and that isn't necessarily what everybody is going to enjoy, but it's having the life that you want to have rather than accepting the life that you feel you've been given. Um, and for me, yes, it is very much about having the freedom. Freedom is my highest kind of value. That, and it doesn't mean I'm not responsible for anything or anyone. It's having the freedom to choose
Yeah.
what I want at any point, which is amazing. To be able to do that is blooming wonderful. I
Yeah,
love having that freedom. Yeah,
absolutely. It is probably the number one response that I get is freedom. But
yeah,
freedom means slightly different things to different people. So it's always
absolutely. Yeah.
an interesting question to get feedback on. So thank
Mm.
you so much. Thank you so much for your time, for getting up early and
I
being
was up. I was up. It was okay.
thank you so much for being with us and for sharing your insights. For those that would love to explore a little bit more of what you do, what's the best place for them to find you?
So I'm on all the socials, Anita McKenna UK. So Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I am on Twitter, but I don't really use it, so probably not that one. It's not even Twitter anymore. See, that's how
Yeah,
bad.
I never bothered. I just, yeah, keep it simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is very easy to find everybody now, which makes life pretty straightforward.
Yes.
So thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a gorgeous rest of your day. It is
Thank you, Edwina.
essentially dinner time for me, so that's what I'm off to
Yeah.
do. For those of you that managed to catch us live, thank you so much for being with us. For those that catch the replay, please don't forget to just leave a little bit of feedback, say hello, let us know where you're tuning in from, and I will see you again tomorrow morning for another fabulous interview in our Blossoming Women series. That's it from me tonight. So much love and bye for now.